Okay. Today is May 28th, 2014, and we are interviewing Robert Cook at the Adams County Courthouse in Quincy, Illinois. Judge Cook is 70 years old, having been born on November 6th, 1943. My name is Emily Shuring Jones, and I'll be the interviewer. And Judge Cook, could you state for the recording what war and branch of service you served in?
I was in the Vietnam War, and I was a member of the United States Marine Corps.
And what was your rank?
Captain.
And were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
And where were you living at the time you enlisted?
I was a law student at the University of Illinois in Champaign.
And why did you join?
I'd received a draft notice, and I'd reported for a draft physical 3 times in Chicago. I was interested in being a JAG lawyer, but they didn't have any openings. So I just joined the Marine Corps as a regular officer.
Why did you pick the Marines?
I had a friend, Mike Zwick, who was in the Marine Corps, and he told me it was a good organization.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Yes, I do.
You went to boot camp or basic training?
It was OCS, Officer Candidate School in Quantico.
Do you remember your instructors?
Yes, drill instructor Barrett. They called him Black Bart.
Why was that?
He was a pretty rough guy.
So was it a hard experience?
Yes, it was a difficult experience, but you just had to stand at attention and keep saying, yes, sir.
So you served in Vietnam. Where did you go?
I was with the 1st Marine Air Wing in Da Nang. 1st Marine Air Wing handled courts martial for a bunch of units, CAG units, combined action groups. So we got out in the field all over I-Corps.
Do you remember when you arrived?
Yes. My wife and I, of course, we were dating at the time. We'd finally decided to get married. And 2 days later, the colonel said, Bob, you've got orders to Vietnam. So we got married a week after I got back. But we were sitting watching the first man landing on the moon in July 1969. And then she drove me down to Scott Air Force Base, where I took a plane to, what was the place in Arizona, and we flew out of Arizona.
What was your first impression when you arrived?
We flew into Okinawa. I was there for a couple of days. We stored some of our gear, and then flew into Da Nang, the big runway. Interesting place. We took rockets every night for the first month or 2 I was there.
You said your job assignment involved the JAG
Yes.
and court martials. Did you see any combat?
Well, yes, we took rockets every night. I guess you'd call that combat. My son is a stagehand in New York, and I flew out there after 9/11, and he said to me, were you scared flying on those airplanes? And I said, most of the aircraft I've been on in my life were helicopters with machine guns pointed out the door. So no, these airplanes didn't scare me at all.
Were there any casualties in your unit?
I lost a lot of friends from my basic school class. And of course, we lost people in the air wing. I wasn't particularly close to them, but yeah, we lost people.
Can you tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences?
Um, well, there were some interesting courts martial. Uh, my dad was an insurance adjuster, and I'd worked for him for uh, during the summers, and I was good at taking statements. So when I was assigned as a defense counsel, I would go out into the field and interview people and take statements. In one of the cases we had, a gunnery sergeant was accused of disobeying orders. Uh, his captain had gone on leave and the unit got hit and they'd lost a fellow. And the captain was upset about it, so the gunny was charged with dereliction of duty, disobedience of orders. So I went out in the field and I took a statement from the captain and I said, "What was it you told the gunnery sergeant?" And he said, "I told him 1, 2, and 3. And I took the statement, he signed it. Then we had the trial a month or so later, and the captain is on the stand and he was asked by the prosecutor, "What did you tell the gunnery sergeant?" And he said, "I told him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And of course, when I showed him his statement, he had a little bit of trouble with that. And the jury took about 15 minutes before they found the gunnery sergeant not guilty. So that was one of my interesting experiences.
I know you have more.
Well, yeah, sure. Well, one of the interesting things was the My Lai massacre case was going on back in the United States when I got into Vietnam, and Lieutenant Calley was on trial, and I talked to the sergeant major as we arrived, and I was mentioning the Calley case. And he said, "Here, I want to show you something." And it was a picture of Lieutenant Calley with a big black eye. Calley was in the Army down at My Lai. And it turned out what had happened was Calley had been driving along some road and he saw these Marines fooling around off the side of the road. And he jumped out and said, "You guys quit fooling around, start acting like good soldiers." And the one Marine said to him, "We aren't soldiers, we're Marines, blankety blank," and popped him in the eye. And so the photograph was of Calley with a big black eye with his hands on his hips. Very interesting. And the Marine was court-martialed, but the jury didn't seem to think he was too guilty of anything. I think he was convicted, but given 2 weeks in the brig or something like that.
Was the jury made up of his peers or?
Actually, it was a judge alone, just one judge, no jury.
Do you have any other instances that spring to mind?
Well, the things that were interesting, we traveled all over I-Corps, got down to Chu Lai, which was a big runway air base, up to Hue, Phu Bai, Quang Tri, Dong Ha. Dong Ha was very close to the DMZ, and it was a very temporary air base. It just had metal slats for a runway. It was not a concrete runway. And the interesting thing to me was there was a sign up on the wall, Dong Ha International Airport. And you know, the guys that were serving were funny. They were funny.
You weren't a prisoner of war at any time.
Oh no,
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
just the standard Vietnam service medals and the military enlistment and wartime medal.
Did you said you were a captain. Did you start as a captain?
No, as I said, I just went in as a regular Marine officer, so I was a second lieutenant, and then they changed the rules, so you needed more JAG lawyers, and so they bumped me up. I went from second lieutenant to captain overnight, and became a JAG lawyer.
How long had you been in before that happened?
Oh, about 6 months or so. Well, 6 months after I graduated from basic school.
Are there any memories you have of basic that come to mind?
Basic school, oh, sure. 30-mile hikes and the obstacle course. The, the obstacle course was very interesting. I was one of the older guys in the group, and so I was able to run the obstacle course, but there were other guys who were a lot faster than I was. And then we had the double running of the obstacle course. And some of the fast guys were too fast, and they couldn't make it twice. But slow me, I just cranked on through and got it done.
You said earlier that a lot of it was saying yes, sir, and saluting to get through.
Yes.
Was there any other, anything else that helped you make it through that process?
The OCS was basically boot camp, and it was sort of tough. TBS, the basic school, they were trying to teach you some things. One of my comments was, when I was 11 or 12 years old, I was watching a show on television, Daniel Shore, the 20th Century, and this was like 1954 or 1955, and he was talking about Dien Bien Phu, the French defeat at Dien Bien Phu. And I remember saying to my mother, "Whose side are we on?" And my mother said, "We aren't on anybody's side. We are not on anybody's side." And then 12 or 13 years later, I'm in Quantico, and they show that same clip from Daniel Shore. Very interesting.
When you were in training, were you able to stay in contact with your family?
In OCS, all I did was write a letter or two. It's very interesting. Life was a lot different then. You didn't have cell phones and all this. And I was amazed at, while I was in Vietnam, a couple of times I called home, but to do that, you had to go to this radio station, and they would shortwave radio, somebody in the United States who would dial whoever you were going to talk to on the phone. And it was just completely different than the way things are right now. When I was in Vietnam, most of the way I communicated was I had a tape recorder, and I would send tape recordings home to my future wife, Fran.
How often would you do that?
Oh, once a week or so.
And did you get any communications back?
Oh, sure. And we wrote lots of letters to each other.
What was the food like?
I was in a good spot. The 1st Marine Air Base was there at Da Nang, and so we had a good kitchen. And we lived in an old French BOQ, Bachelor Officers' Quarters. So we had some protection. One time a rocket landed right outside, but we had concrete walls, so we were okay.
The accommodations were not too shabby.
They were not ideal, but they were a lot better than what a lot of people had.
Did you have enough supplies and the things you needed?
Oh, yeah.
Did you feel any pressure or stress during your time over there?
I just put off thinking about a lot of things. And actually, it was sort of like practicing law back here in the United States. So,
How so?
well, you had cases that you were working on, and you were trying to get things done, and you had to move around to do it. As a defense counsel, I didn't have a Jeep or anything like that. So when I would go from one place to another, I'd hitch rides, which seems sort of weird. I'd read a lot of books about Vietnam. Bernard Fall had written a book, The Two Vietnams, which I'd read, and then another book, The Street Without Joy. And turned out the street without joy was Highway 1. And we lived right next to Highway 1 there in that BOQ in Da Nang. And I remember hitchhiking up Highway 1 from Hue to Quang Tri and talking to a captain there and saying, where's the bad spot? And I said, are the bad spots back towards the mountains? He said, actually, there's a pretty bad spot between Highway 1 and the ocean here in the South China Sea. And of all things, I found out that's where Bernard Fall was killed, right along Highway 1 near Quang Tri, the street without joy.
Did you feel like his account was, could you relate to his account? Or
Yes. Of course, the French had a lot different experience there than we did. But yeah, I thought his discussion was very interesting. It's always been hard for me to figure out the French and how the French survived World War II, and then how they went into Vietnam or stayed in Vietnam. Just a very interesting thing. I read a Graham Greene novel not too long ago, The Quiet American, and he was very critical of the Americans back in the early 50s for not supporting the French more. But I think we did support them a lot. I was at a presentation, here a year or so ago, where they were showing pictures of Vietnam, and there was an old Navy guy there, and he said he'd gone into Da Nang after Dien Bien Phu to help evacuate French people, French soldiers. And he said they were mad as heck. It was interesting, Da Nang, most of the Vietnamese people I knew at Da Nang were refugees from the north. They'd come down from the north after the French had been defeated. And they were also Catholics, French Catholics. And I remember trying to learn some Vietnamese, and they're teaching me, Bu Cu is a lot, TT is not very much. I'm thinking, wait a minute, Bu Cu, this is French. And I think to some extent the Vietnamese people saw foreigners as being all from the same lot. So
you mentioned that there were Catholics around. Did you have a chance to go to church while you were there?
yeah, we did. We had Mass there in the base on Sundays. So whenever I was in Da Nang, at the 1st Marine Air Wing base in Da Nang, I was able to go to church on Sunday. But out in the boonies, you didn't have that available. So.
You mentioned a minute ago you were defense counsel, so you had to hitchhike. Does that mean the prosecutors didn't have that handicap?
Well, they had military police who would take statements and gather evidence, but defense counsel didn't have anything like that.
How did people entertain themselves?
There was an officers club in the 1st Marine Air Wing, and actually there was an officers club down at Chu Lai. and they had movies. Also, every once in a while, we got to go to the beach. There was a beautiful beach there, China Beach at Da Nang.
Did you go to the movies often, or
Not very often, no. And then Bob Hope actually came and put on a show while we were there, but I didn't attend that. They had quite a crowd for that.
were there anybody other than, was there anyone other than Bob Hope who came? That was,
They would get bands in every now and then, a lot from the Philippines. I always tell everybody there's a song, Detroit City by Bobby Bare, and the lyrics, last night I went to sleep in Detroit City. I dreamed about my mama, my sister, and my brother. I want to go home. I want to go home. And that was the song everybody played all the time with those lyrics. I want to go home. So,
did you have much interaction with the locals?
yes,
you did.
yes, we did, because we had, of course, the CAG units were combined action groups, and they were working with the locals out in the various bills. And then in our office, we had a lot of employees who were Vietnamese, and so I got to know those people pretty well. A couple times we went out in the Ville with the people that worked in our office and had a little get together, and that was a lot of fun.
Was there food, or
There was food. They didn't eat very well, of course, but
have you stayed in touch with anybody over there?
no, I'm afraid most of the people I knew were gone.
Did you get to go on leave?
Yes, got to go on R&R to Hong Kong
And how often did you get to do that?
just once.
How long did you get to stay?
I think it was 5 days.
Is there anything memorable that you did, or did you just relax?
Oh, it was a very interesting place, Hong Kong. Took some little boat rides and traveled around the island and stayed in a nice hotel. Yeah, it was fun.
Did you go on your own, or were there others with you?
I had a friend who went with me. We both signed up for the same trip.
Were there any pranks that were pulled while you were over there, either by you or that you observed?
No, I didn't pull any pranks, but of course, one of the big concerns was fragging, where somebody would be mad at one of his officers and there'd be a shooting or there'd be a grenade or something like that. I never was involved in any fragging courts martial, but some of my friends were, and yeah, it's scary.
I think you have some photographs with you. Can you tell me a little bit about what you brought?
Well, here's a picture of me there in Da Nang. And then the other 3 pictures are my old TBS group. We got together here a few years ago, and I never wanted to go to the Vietnamese wall. I could never make myself do it, but they went, and so I went along. That's the only time I've been there. So 3 pictures of us at the Vietnam Wall.
Who are the people in these pictures?
I can't. Carl Waddell is one of them, and I can't remember who else is there.
And how did you know these guys?
I knew him from basic school back in 1968. We graduated in July of '68 from the basic school.
How long were you in Vietnam?
A year.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yes. Yes, I do. Turned in my materials at Quantico, and I had an uncle in Norfolk, Virginia, and we drove down there and spent a few days at the beach and had a good time.
Who was we?
Fran and I, my wife and I got married after I got back from Vietnam. Sort of weird. I hadn't seen her for a year, and then we get married, and we had a good time.
What did you do in the days and weeks after you got back?
Okay, I came back in, let's see, July of '69, and I was assigned to Quantico, and I did lawyer work there at Quantico until December of '69.
What happened when you were discharged in December of
Yeah, that was
69?
my tour was up.
What did you do after that?
I came back to Quincy and joined the Schmiedeskamp law firm.
So you were done with your education at that point. So
Yes.
you didn't have an opportunity to take advantage of the GI Bill, or
No, nothing like that.
did you make any close friendships while you were in the service?
Oh, sure.
Who were some of your close friends?
Well, my closest friend was a fellow named Chuck Williams. He was another lawyer, and he's passed away now.
Did you keep in touch with him after you came back?
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
How long did your friendship last before he passed?
Oh, he passed away a couple years ago, and we were friends right up until the very end. He was the fellow I went to Hong Kong with.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Yes, I'm a member of the VFW and the American Legion.
Are you active in those at all?
Oh, I
today?
wouldn't say I'm very active. No.
Well, you've alluded to this, but when you came back from the war, you were an attorney. Can you describe your career after the war?
Oh, well, sure. As a lawyer, I did a lot of business work for Mormon Manufacturing Company and for Knapheide Manufacturing Company, Quincy Soybean, and Calcium Carbonate Company. Did some appellate work. We had one case that went to the United States Supreme Court, which we lost, which I lost 6-3. I was in the Schmiedeskamp firm for about 10 years, and then I left. I was on my own for about a year, and then I became a trial judge. And let's see, I was a trial judge for 7 or 8 years, and then I went to the appellate court.
Did your experience in the military influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Sure. Sure. Like I said, I'd read a lot of things about World War II and about the French in Vietnam. I'm proud to have been in the Marine Corps. I thought the United States did the right thing, trying to help out in Vietnam. I thought it was a mistake the way we got out of it. And it seems to me that's been the way a lot of our military events have occurred. We try to do the right thing and then we quit.
You showed me some pictures a little bit ago of some guys you were in basic with. Was that part of a regular reunion, or was it
Yeah,
just...
we get together every couple of years. So we've been doing it at Quantico and at Washington, D.C. We got together at San Diego one time. So
This is kind of an open-ended question, but how did your service and experiences in the military affect your life?
well, so this is sort of funny. There's a book, The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, and I was asked to speak at the library Big Read about that book. And I'm sort of amazed it's such a popular book. I didn't like it that much. But it was interesting to me how he complained about how Vietnam had interfered with his life. He was a very good student. He had a scholarship someplace, and then he had to go off to Vietnam. And I think it's the same for everybody. You know, here I am in law school. I'm an editor of the Law Review. I'm offered a clerkship in the federal court, and then I have to join the military. So it's a real interruption for everybody, I'm sure. Another thing I remember was reading an obituary about a fellow here in Quincy in the Korean War, and he had a baseball job offer in the major leagues, and he had to go to Korea. And it's a real interruption for everybody, but it's, I think, what we're obligated to do.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that I haven't asked you about?
I guess the one thing that I think about a lot is my friends who were killed in Vietnam. And back in those days, I just kept putting it out of my mind and not thinking about it and not thinking about it. And now I think about it a lot more. I think about all the wonderful things I've had, and they never had the opportunity. You know, wonderful wife, great kids, grandkids, and they never saw any of that. Yeah, I think about that a lot.
I see you have a T-shirt there that you brought also. What is that?
Oh, that's a shirt that they put out at our reunions, and it's got the names of everybody that was in the basic school on the back. So it's sort of interesting. It's sort of interesting.
Is there anything else that I haven't asked you about?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. Well, I thank you for your time and your stories.
Okay.
I'll turn off the recording now.